Chapter 1. The Threshold. The marriage had been a mistake from the beginning. Elena Thorne stood in the grand foyer of her new husband's estate, her traveling case still clutched in numb fingers, and understood with perfect clarity that she had traded one cage for another. The telegram from her uncle had been explicit. Married or destitute, choose. After the scandal her name dragged through London's drawing rooms like something rotten, marriage to a reclusive gentleman had seemed the lesser evil she had not expected. The mansion rose around her like a cathedral, built to honor darkness itself. Black marble floors stretched toward shadows that gasped and flickered in candlelight. No gas lamps, no electric fixtures, just hundreds of candles in iron sconces, their flames painting the vaulted ceiling in shades of amber and blood. The air tasted of old stone and beeswax and something else, something metallic that made her tongue feel heavy. Mrs. Blackwood. Elena turned. The housekeeper stood 3 paces behind her, silent as smoke. The woman's face was porcelain pale, her dark dress severe, her eyes colorless in the wavering light. Your husband will join you at nightfall, the housekeeper continued, her voice flat as winter ice. Until then, you are to remain in the east wing. The west wing is forbidden. The cellars are forbidden. The north tower is forbidden. Do you understand? Elena's spine straightened. She had spent 3 months enduring whispers and turned backs after her fiance's public betrayal. She would not be cowed by a servant in her own home. I understand perfectly. Though I confess, it seems a great many parts of my husband's house are closed to his wife. Something flickered behind the housekeeper's eyes, amusement, perhaps, or warning. Mr. Blackwood values privacy, madam. As should you, if you wish to thrive here. Thrive. The word choice was deliberate, Elena thought. Not live, not be happy. Thrive, as though she were a plant requiring specific conditions to avoid withering. Show me to my rooms, please. The housekeeper inclined her head and turned without waiting to see if Elena followed. They climbed a sweeping staircase, their footsteps swallowed by thick Persian runners, the color of dried roses. Portraits lined the walls, men and women in clothing that spanned centuries, their painted eyes following Elena's ascent. All of them shared the same unsettling beauty, sharp cheekbones, pale skin, mouths carved with aristocratic precision. His family, Elena realized. But why would a man display ancestors dating back to the Renaissance in perfect, unbroken lineage? Her rooms occupied a corner suite overlooking gardens. She could barely see through the gathering dusk. The bedroom was opulent velvet curtains, a 4-poster bed with midnight blue hangings, furniture that whispered of wealth accumulated over lifetimes. But there were no mirrors. Elena checked the dressing room, the sitting room, the bathing chamber. Not a single reflective surface. Why are there no mirrors? She asked when the housekeeper returned with her unpacked trunks. Mr. Blackwood finds them distasteful. That's not an answer. The housekeeper's mouth curved slightly. Nevertheless, it is the only one you will receive. Dinner will be sent to your rooms. Your husband will call upon you after sunset. She paused at the threshold. A word of advice, Mrs. Blackwood. Ask fewer questions. Live longer. The door closed with a whisper of finality. Elena stood in the center of her gilded cage and fought the urge to scream. She had married a stranger to escape ruin. Alexander Blackwood had appeared like an answer to desperate prayer, wealthy, titled, and conveniently absent from society. Their courtship had consisted of 3 formal meetings and a contract negotiated through solicitors. She had seen her husband's face exactly once, briefly, through a veil of rain and carriage window. Dark hair, pale skin, eyes that had seemed to glow amber in the stormlight. Now, as shadows pooled in the corners and candles sputtered, Elena wondered what she had truly agreed to. She moved to the window. The gardens below were a maze of sculpted hedges and statuary, beautiful and lifeless. Beyond them, she could see the edge of a vast forest, its trees twisted against the darkening sky. No neighboring estates, no distant lights, just wilderness. And this house, perched at the edge of civilization like something waiting. The sun set. Elena felt it in her bones, a shift in the air, a sudden heaviness that made her skin prickle. Somewhere in the house, a door opened. Footsteps sounded in the corridor outside her room, deliberate and unhurried. A knock. 3 measured beats. Come in, Elena called, hating the tremor in her voice. The door opened. Alexander Blackwood stood in the threshold, and Elena's breath caught despite herself. He was beautiful the way winter was beautiful, cold and perfect and absolutely merciless. Tall, with shoulders that filled his impeccably tailored black coat. His face could have been carved from marble. High cheekbones, a mouth almost cruel in its precision, eyes that burned like coals beneath dark brows. His hair was black as a raven's wing, pulled back to reveal the aristocratic architecture of his features. But it was his stillness that terrified her. He didn't breathe, didn't blink. He simply stood there, watching her with an intensity that made her feel like prey. "Wife," he said softly. His voice was silk over steel, cultured and ancient. "Welcome home." Chapter 2. The beast in gentleman's cloth. Angelena's training and deportment had prepared her for many uncomfortable social situations. It had not prepared her for a husband who moved like smoke and watched her with eyes that reflected candlelight like an animal's. "Thank you," she managed, her voice steadier than she felt. "Though I confess, the welcome has been rather conditional." Alexander's mouth curved slightly. It was not quite a smile. "You've met Mrs. Holloway then. She does tend toward dire warnings." He stepped into the room, and Elena fought the instinct to retreat. "The restrictions are for your safety, not your imprisonment." "Safety from what?" "From things you are not yet ready to understand." He moved to the window with fluid grace, his back to her, hands clasped behind him. In profile, he was even more striking and more unsettling. His skin held a luminous quality, as though lit from within by cold fire. No flush of warmth, no evidence of circulation beneath that perfect surface. "You're wondering why I married you," he said, without turning, "among other things." "Yes. The truth would frighten you." "I'm already frightened," Elena replied. "At least give me the courtesy of honesty." Now he did turn, and the full weight of his attention made her heart stutter. "Very well. I needed a wife. You needed an escape. Our arrangement is mutually beneficial, nothing more. You will have wealth, protection, and freedom to pursue whatever interests occupy your time. In exchange, you will maintain the appearance of a marriage and ask no questions about my private affairs." "Private affairs." Elena's hands clenched in her skirts. "You mean your mistress?" Something dark flickered across his expression, amusement mixed with something sharper. "No, Mrs. Blackwood, I have no mistress. My affairs are of a different nature entirely." "Then what?" "No questions." His voice dropped to a register that vibrated in her chest. "That was the agreement." Elena's anger flared, bright and reckless. "The agreement was negotiated by solicitors while I was fighting to keep my reputation from complete destruction. I never agreed to live as a prisoner in a house full of forbidden rooms and servants who speak in riddles." "You agreed when you signed the contract." "A contract I barely read. Because my uncle gave me 1 week to accept or be thrown into the street." She stepped forward, fury overriding caution. "You want a decoration for your cursed house? Fine, but don't expect me to play the obedient fool while you hide behind locked doors and veiled threats." Silence crashed between them. Alexander stared at her with an expression she couldn't read: surprise, perhaps, or reassessment. Then slowly, deliberately, he smiled. It transformed his face from beautiful to devastating, and Elena realized with cold clarity that she had just made either the best or worst decision of her life. "You have teeth," he murmured. "Good, you'll need them." Before she could respond, he moved impossibly fast, crossing the space between them in less than a heartbeat. Elena gasped and stumbled back, but he didn't touch her. He simply stood close enough that she could see the unnatural stillness of his chest, the complete absence of breath. "Listen carefully," he said softly. "This house sits at the center of a war you cannot comprehend. There are forces that would destroy you simply for bearing my name. The restrictions exist because my enemies do not discriminate between combatants and casualties. If you venture into the West Wing, you will die. If you enter the cellars, you will die. If you ignore Mrs. Holloway's warnings, you will die. Do you understand?" "What enemies?" Elena whispered. "What war?" His jaw tightened. "No questions. You just told me I'll need teeth. How am I supposed to survive if you won't even you survive by obeying?" His hand rose, and Elena flinched, but he only brushed a strand of hair from her face with fingers cold as marble. "You survive by staying in the light, in the rooms I've prepared for you, behind the protections I've woven into every threshold. You survive by trusting that I am far more dangerous than anything that might hunt you." The words should have been reassuring. Instead, They confirmed her worst fear. She had married a monster. Not metaphorically, not in the sense of a cruel man, but something else entirely. Something that didn't breathe, didn't warm, didn't move like human flesh should move. What are you? The question escaped before she could stop it. Alexander's eyes blazed amber bright for just an instant, and Elena saw something ancient and predatory stir behind them. Then he stepped back, the distance between them suddenly a chasm. Your husband, he said flatly. Nothing more, nothing less. That's a lie, perhaps. He moved toward the door with that same unnatural grace. But it's the lie we'll both live with. Dinner will arrive within the hour. I suggest you eat. Tomorrow, Mrs. Holloway will show you the permitted areas of the estate. Learn them well. And you? Elena demanded. Where will you be? Occupied with matters that don't concern you. He paused at the threshold, his back to her. One more thing, Mrs. Blackwood. The invitation you received from Lady Ashford, decline it. You are not to leave the estate without my explicit permission. You can't imprison me here. I can. I will. And if you value your life, you'll thank me for it. He turned his head slightly, giving her his profile. There are things in this world that make death seem a mercy. I am keeping you from them. Try to remember that when you curse my name. Then he was gone. The door closing behind him with silent finality. Elena stood trembling in the candlelight, her mind racing. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to flee this house and its impossible master. But where would she go? Back to London, to face ruin and destitution? Back to her uncle, who had sold her to a stranger without a second thought. She had no allies, no resources, no choices, only a husband who wasn't human, and a house full of secrets that wanted her dead. Chapter 3. Shadows and Threshold. Selena didn't sleep that first night. She lay in the four-poster bed, surrounded by velvet and silence, watching candlelight paint restless patterns on the ceiling. Every creak of the house made her pulse spike. Every whisper of wind against the windows sounded like breathing. What are you? The question circled her mind like a vulture. Her husband didn't breathe, didn't reflect warmth, moved with inhuman speed and stillness. The servants spoke of survival, not happiness. The house itself felt wrong, beautiful and ancient and waiting, like a tomb dressed up as a palace. When dawn finally broke, pale and gray through the eastern windows, Elena rose and dressed herself. No maid appeared, though she'd heard footsteps in the corridor throughout the night. Deliberate footsteps, measured, never quite stopping at her door. She found Mrs. Holloway waiting in the breakfast room, a study in black silk and disapproval. You didn't sleep, the housekeeper observed. No, Elena sat, eyeing the breakfast spread: toast, jam, tea, sliced fruit. Normal food, human food. The relief was almost laughable. I find it difficult to rest in strange houses. You'll adjust. Or you won't. Mrs. Holloway poured tea with practiced efficiency. Mr. Blackwood has asked me to show you the permitted areas. I suggest you pay attention. There will be no second tour. They began in the east wing, where Elena's rooms occupied the finest suite. The corridor extended in both directions, lined with guest chambers that looked untouched for decades. Dust sheets covered furniture. Portraits watched from walls with painted eyes that seemed too knowing. These rooms are safe, Mrs. Holloway said, as is the library, the conservatory, the east gardens, and the main drawing room. The kitchens are permitted during daylight hours only. Only during daylight? Mr. Blackwood entertains guests at night. It's better if you're not present. Elena stopped walking. What sort of guests require the lady of the house to hide? Mrs. Holloway's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her colorless eyes. The sort who would find your presence distracting. Mr. Blackwood conducts business with dangerous men. Your safety depends on remaining invisible to them. And my husband? Is he also dangerous? More than you can possibly imagine. The housekeeper turned down another corridor, her skirts whispering against marble. But not to you. Not yet. Not yet. Elena filed the phrase away, another piece of a puzzle she couldn't yet see whole. They passed a locked door marked with strange symbols, not English letters, but something older, carved deep into ancient wood. Elena reached toward it instinctively. Don't, Mrs. Holloway's hand shot out, surprisingly strong, gripping Elena's wrist. That threshold is warded. If you cross it uninvited, the protections will kill you before whatever's inside gets the chance. Elena jerked back. What's inside? The West Wing. I told you, forbidden. The housekeeper released her, smoothing her skirts with deliberate calm. There are rules in this house, Mrs. Blackwood. Rules older than you, older than your country, older than most of the languages spoken on this earth. They exist for reasons that have nothing to do with cruelty and everything to do with survival. Break them, and you break the protections keeping you alive. Protections from what? From the houses that want you dead, Mrs. Holloway began walking again, her pace brisk. From the factions that would use you as leverage against your husband. From creatures that hunt in the dark and feed on the vulnerable. Elena's breath caught. Creatures. You mean I mean nothing. I imply everything. The housekeeper stopped at a grand staircase that spiraled down into darkness. The cellars. Also forbidden. The entrance is warded, as are the windows and every threshold in the east wing. You're safe in your permitted areas. Nowhere else. Elena stared down into the shadows, her mind racing. Houses, factions, creatures that feed in the dark. The pieces were there, scattered like shards of broken mirror, each one reflecting something impossible. My husband, she said slowly. He doesn't eat, doesn't sleep during the night, doesn't breathe. Mrs. Holloway said nothing. The portraits in the hall, his ancestors, they all look the same. Not similar, the same. As though, Elena's voice dropped to a whisper. As though they're all him. Still nothing. The servants move silently. The house has no mirrors. Everything happens at night. Elena turned to face the housekeeper fully, her heart hammering. What is he? Mrs. Holloway met her gaze with something almost like respect. Clever. Your uncle said you were bookish and ruined. He didn't mention clever. Answer the question. I can't. That truth is not mine to give. The housekeeper's expression softened, just slightly. But I will tell you this. Alexander Blackwood has lived in this house for longer than your country has existed. He has survived wars, plagues, and betrayals that would destroy lesser beings. He is both monster and savior, depending on who's telling the story. And he chose you for a reason. What reason? That you'll have to ask him yourself, Mrs. Holloway began climbing back up the stairs. The tour is finished. You have free access to the library. Perhaps you'll find answers there. Mr. Blackwood keeps an extensive collection. Some of the volumes are very old indeed. Elena followed, her mind spinning. The library, of course. If her husband was something ancient, something impossible, there might be records, histories, evidence. Mrs. Holloway, she called, as the housekeeper reached the landing. When you said not yet, that he's not dangerous to me yet, what did you mean? The older woman paused, her back still turned. I meant that Mr. Blackwood has excellent control. But all predators hunger, Mrs. Blackwood, all of them. Remember that when you're alone with him in the dark. Then she was gone, leaving Elena standing in the corridor with her pulse thundering and the truth crystallizing in her mind like ice. Her husband was a vampire, and she was living in his house. Surrounded by his kind, protected only by rules she didn't understand and wards she couldn't see. The question wasn't what he was. The question was, what did he want with her? Chapter 4. The library of Blood. The library consumed the entire south corner of the permitted wing, 3 stories of books spiraling upward into shadows that even candlelight couldn't pierce. Elena stood at the entrance, breathless despite herself. She had always loved libraries. As a child, she'd hidden in her father's study, devouring novels, while her mother despaired of ever making her marriageable. After the scandal, books had been her only companions, her only escape from whispers and shame. This library was different. It didn't offer escape. It offered answers. Elena began with the oldest volumes, the ones bound in leather so ancient it felt like skin beneath her fingers. Latin texts, Greek, languages she couldn't read, but recognized from university lectures she'd attended disguised as her brother's guest. She found a volume in English, finally, dated 1823, titled A Complete History of the Bloodborne Houses of Europe. Her hands trembled as she opened it. The first covenant was written in blood and sealed with death. When mortal men still cowered in caves, the bloodborne walked among them, neither living nor dead, sustained by the vital essence of the quick. They were called many names, Strigoi, Nosferatu, the Night Lords, the Undying. But they called themselves simply the Bloodborne, for blood was their curse and their salvation. Elena sank into a leather chair, reading by candlelight as the truth unspooled before her. The great houses arose in the Dark Ages, each one claiming territory and establishing laws to govern their kind. House Corvus held the north, House Knox ruled the eastern kingdoms. House Tenebris claimed the Mediterranean. And House Blackwood, eldest of all, dominated the west. House Blackwood, her husband's name. His house, the Blackwoods, were known for three things: their absolute control, their strategic brilliance, and their terrible restraint. While other houses fed with abandon, the Blackwoods established the first law: no feeding without consent. It made them powerful among mortals, and despised among their own kind. Elena's breath caught. Consent. Her husband's house had built itself on consent. She read faster, devouring pages. But power breeds enemies. House Tenebris, led by the cruel Lord Cassius, rejected the first law. They fed freely, killed openly, and accumulated mortal servants through fear rather than contract. The War of Houses began in 1847 and has never truly ended. A cold conflict of assassination, sabotage, and strategic marriages designed to consolidate power. Strategic marriages. Elena's stomach dropped. She flipped ahead, searching for recent entries, and found a handwritten edition dated just 3 months prior. Lord Cassius seeks to destroy House Blackwood's mortal protections by eliminating Alexander Blackwood's consorts. 4 have died in 18 months. Blackwood requires a wife who can survive the coming siege, or at least provide useful distraction while he fortifies his position. The book slipped from Elena's numb fingers and hit the floor, with a sound like a gunshot. "I see, you've found my journals," Elena spun. Alexander stood in the doorway, dressed in black, his eyes gleaming amber in the candlelight. How long had he been watching? "You married me as bait," she whispered. "As distraction. I married you as protection." He moved into the room with that predatory grace, each step measured. "Cassius hunts my house by targeting vulnerabilities. Mortal wives are considered vulnerabilities. But a wife who knows the truth, who can protect herself, who understands the rules, that is something else entirely. You should have told me. Would you have believed me?" His voice was soft, dangerous. "Would you have accepted marriage to a vampire if I'd announced it in your uncle's drawing room?" Elena's hands clenched. "You let me walk into this blind. I let you walk in alive." He stopped 3 paces away, close enough that she could see the inhuman stillness of him. "The women before you didn't survive because they didn't know what they faced. They thought the locked doors and warnings were eccentricity. They explored. They broke the wards. They died screaming in the cellars when Cassius's assassins found them." Horror crawled up Elena's spine. "How many?" 4, as the journal states. "All within 18 months. His expression was carved from ice. "I tried protecting them through ignorance. It failed. So I chose differently with you." "You chose a woman desperate enough to marry a stranger," Elena said bitterly. "Someone with nowhere else to go." "I chose a woman intelligent enough to survive." Alexander's gaze held hers, intense and unwavering. "Your uncle mentioned your education, unusual for a woman of your station. You read Latin and Greek. You attended university lectures in disguise. You solved a mathematical problem that had stumped the professor, then fled before anyone could identify you. You are clever, resourceful, and cornered. Those qualities will keep you alive where beauty and innocence failed." Elena's breath came sharp and fast. "And what happens when Cassius's assassins come for me anyway? Then you use the protections I've given you." He gestured to the room around them. "Every threshold in the East Wing is warded against forced entry. The windows are sealed with blood oaths. Even I cannot enter your bedroom without invitation. You are safer here than anywhere in Europe, unless I leave the permitted areas. Unless you leave the permitted areas," he agreed. "The wards recognize intent. If you cross forbidden thresholds through ignorance, they'll warn you. If you cross them deliberately, they'll kill you before any assassin gets the chance. It's a mercy, I assure you." Elena shook her head, her mind reeling. "This is insane. Vampires, blood oaths, houses at war. I'm a vicar's daughter from Yorkshire, not some strategic asset in an immortal conflict. You became an asset the moment you signed the marriage contract." Alexander's voice softened, almost gentle. "I know this is overwhelming. I know you're frightened. But Elena, may I call you Elena?" She nodded numbly. "Elena, I will not lie to you anymore. Ask your questions. I'll answer what I can." A dozen questions fought for dominance. Elena chose the most important one. "Do you intend to turn me into what you are?" "No," his answer was immediate, absolute. "Never without your consent, and I would advise strongly against it. Immortality is a cage, not a gift." "Then what do you want from me?" Alexander was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried centuries of weariness. I want you to survive. Everything else is negotiable. Chapter 5. The blood-packed Alina spent the next 3 days in the library, reading everything she could find about the bloodborne houses. Alexander didn't disturb her, though she felt his presence in the house, a cold pressure that intensified after sunset. Fading only at dawn, she learned that vampires couldn't enter a home without invitation, couldn't cross running water without boats, and burned in direct sunlight. Old myths, mostly true, but the reality was more complex than folklore suggested. Blood sustained them, yes, but not just any blood. Willing blood held power that stolen blood lacked. A vampire who fed only on the unwilling grew strong but unstable, prone to madness and loss of control. Those who honored consent, who negotiated, who formed bonds, retained their humanity, or whatever passed for humanity in creatures that had forgotten how to die. House Blackwood's power came from this principle. Their human consorts gave blood freely in exchange for protection, wealth, and the vampire's strategic support. It was transactional, yes, but not slavery. The distinction mattered. House Tenebris, by contrast, took what they wanted. Lord Cassius kept entire estates full of human cattle, bred and raised for feeding. The thought made Elena's stomach turn. On the 4th night, Alexander knocked on her bedroom door. May I enter? Elena looked up from her book, a treatise on vampire physiology that was equal parts fascinating and horrifying. Yes, he appeared in the doorway, and Elena noticed details she'd missed before. The way his clothes hung perfectly despite the absence of breath to fill them. The faint luminescence to his skin, as though moonlight lived beneath the surface. The controlled precision of every movement, nothing wasted, nothing careless. You've been reading, he observed. I have questions. I expected you would. He gestured to the chair opposite hers. May I sit? The formality was deliberate, Elena realized. He was giving her control, demonstrating the consent his house valued. She nodded. Alexander sat with inhuman grace, his eyes never leaving her face. Ask. The other wives, Elena began carefully. How did they die? Cassius sent hunters, young vampires, barely turned, expendable. They infiltrated the estate through the cellars. The women heard sounds, grew curious, crossed the threshold. His jaw tightened. The wards killed 2 of them instantly. The hunters killed the others before my people could intervene. And you didn't warn them? I told them the cellars were forbidden. I told them their lives depended on obedience. But I didn't tell them why, and curiosity is a powerful force. His gaze held hers. With you, I'm trying something different. Truth, he agreed. Even if it terrifies you. Elena set her book aside. I read about blood bonds. The library says they're the strongest connection a vampire can form with a mortal. Mutual feeding, mutual protection. Is that what you want from me? Alexander's expression flickered, surprise perhaps, or reassessment. Eventually, yes, but not yet. You're not ready. How do you know? Because you still flinch when I enter a room. His voice was soft, not unkind. Because your pulse spikes every time I move too quickly. Because you sleep with a knife under your pillow, yes. I noticed, and you haven't stopped planning your escape. Heat flooded Elena's cheeks. Can you blame me? No, I admire it. He leaned forward slightly. Elena, a blood bond requires trust. Absolute trust. The mortal must willingly offer their throat, knowing the vampire could drain them dry. The vampire must exercise restraint, knowing the mortal's blood could drive them to madness. It's the most intimate act our kind can perform. Rushing it would destroy us both. Then why mention it at all? Because Cassius will escalate. He's already learned that killing my wives accomplishes nothing. I simply acquire new ones. So he'll try something else. Kidnapping, perhaps. Torture. Using you as leverage to draw me into a trap. Alexander's eyes blazed. Amber. A blood bond would protect you. My blood would recognize any vampire who tried to harm you and retaliate. You would become, in essence, untouchable. Elena's mouth went dry. You want to put your blood in me? A few drops, mixed with yours, sealed with an oath. Nothing more. He held up his hand, palm open. I'm not asking you to decide now. I'm asking you to consider it, to read about it, to understand what I'm offering. Protection in exchange for my blood, partnership in exchange for mutual trust. His correction was firm. I would be as bound to you as you to me. I couldn't harm you without harming myself. I couldn't abandon you without breaking the oath and losing my own power. It's not slavery, Elena. Its alliance. She studied him in the candlelight, this impossible creature who spoke of consent and partnership while admitting he was a predator. What do you get out of it? Beyond my blood? Alexander was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that made her chest ache. I've lived for 600 years. I've watched empires rise and fall. I've seen everyone I've ever cared for turn to dust. The loneliness of immortality isn't poetic, Elena. It's corrosive. It eats at you until you forget what it feels like to be anything but alone. And a blood bond fixes that? A blood bond creates connection. Real connection, not the shallow transactions I've maintained for centuries. I would feel your emotions. You would sense my presence. We would be less alone. The vulnerability in his admission startled her. This was not the cold strategist who'd warned her about forbidden thresholds. This was something rawer, more human, despite the monster wearing its skin. I need time, Elena said finally. Take it. Alexander rose, fluid and controlled once more. I'll answer any questions you have. But Elena, he paused at the threshold. Cassius will make his move soon. Days, perhaps. A week at most. Whatever you decide, decide quickly. Then he was gone, leaving Elena alone with her racing thoughts and the impossible choice before her. Trust a monster, or face worse monsters alone. Chapter 6. The siege begins. The attack came on the 5th night. Elena woke to the sound of breaking glass, not in her room, but somewhere distant. The crash echoed through the house like thunder, followed by a scream that cut off abruptly. She bolted upright, heart hammering. The candles in her room had burned low, casting writhing shadows across the walls. Another crash. Footsteps in the corridor, running. Then silence so complete it felt like suffocation. Elena grabbed the knife from under her pillow, a small blade she'd taken from the breakfast service, and moved to the door. Her hands shook as she pressed her ear against the wood. Nothing. No voices. No movement. Then, Mrs. Blackwood. Mrs. Holloway's voice, urgent and low. Open the door, quickly. Elena hesitated. The voice sounded right, but something felt wrong. The cadence was off, too rushed. Mrs. Blackwood. They've breached the south entrance. You need to come with me now. The south entrance. Elena's mind raced through her library, reading. The south entrance opened into the conservatory, one of her permitted areas. If it was truly breached, staying here might be safer than running. How do I know it's really you? Elena called through the door. Silence. Then laughter, cold and cruel and nothing like Mrs. Holloway's measured tones. Clever little mortal. The voice changed, deepened, became something male and ancient. Alexander chose well this time. No matter. We don't need you to open the door. We just need you to be inside when the fire starts. Elena stumbled back from the door. Fire. They were going to burn her out. Smoke began seeping under the threshold, thick and black and choking. Elena ran to the window, yanking aside the curtains. 3 stories up. The gardens below were dark, but she could see shapes moving between the hedges. Vampires, hunters, trapped. The smoke thickened. Elena grabbed a blanket, pressing it against the door's base, but it was useless. Flames licked under the threshold, catching on the Persian runner. The wards Alexander had promised, where were they? Then she understood. The wards protected against forced entry, against vampires crossing the threshold uninvited. They didn't protect against fire set from the outside. Elena's lungs burned. She had seconds before the smoke overwhelmed her. The window was her only option. She grabbed the velvet curtains, yanking them down. Heavy fabric, strong. She tied one end to the bedpost, tested the knot with desperate strength, then threw the other end out the window. The drop was still too far. She'd break bones if she was lucky. Movement in the gardens below. A figure stepped into the moonlight, and Elena's breath caught. Alexander. He moved through the hunters like death incarnate. She couldn't see details from this distance, but she saw bodies falling, saw the brutal efficiency of a predator 6 centuries old defending his territory. The hunters scattered, but Alexander was faster. Inhumanly, impossibly fast. The fire reached her bed. Flames crawled up the hangings, and heat blasted Elena's face. No more time. She climbed onto the windowsill, gripped the makeshift rope of curtains, and began lowering herself down. The fabric burned her palms. Her arms screamed with the strain. Halfway down, the curtain tore. Elena fell. She hit the ground hard, her ankle twisting with a snap of pain that made her vision white out. For a moment, she couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Then hands cold as marble gripped her shoulders. Don't move. Alexander's voice, sharp with command. He crouched beside her, his face spattered with something dark. Blood, not his own. Your ankle is broken. I'm going to carry you. Don't fight me. He lifted her as though she weighed nothing, cradling her against his chest. Elena's head spun from smoke inhalation and pain, but she forced herself to focus. The house will survive. You won't if we don't move. He ran. And the world blurred. Trees, gardens, stone. They were in the east gardens now, far from the burning wing. But the smoke still billowed into the night sky. Alexander set her down beneath a gazebo, his hands moving over her ankle with surprising gentleness. It's a clean break. Painful, but survivable. I need to reset it. Wait, he didn't wait. There was a wrench of agony, and Elena screamed. Then his hand covered her mouth, not cruelly, but firmly, quietly. He whispered, "There may be more." Elena nodded, tears streaming down her face. He released her, and she bit down on her own hand to keep from screaming again, as he wrapped her ankle with strips torn from his own shirt. Cassius sent 12 hunters, Alexander said, working quickly. I killed 9. 3 escaped. They'll report back that you survived, and he'll escalate further. The blood bond, Elena gasped. You said it would protect me. It would. But I can't force you to accept it, even now. He finished the makeshift splint and met her eyes. I need your consent, Elena. True consent, not compliance born from fear. She looked at him, this creature of night and blood who had just killed 9 vampires to protect her. His face was spattered with gore, his eyes burning with predatory fire, and he was asking for permission. What do I have to do? Elena asked. Trust me. He drew a small knife from his coat. Give me your hand. Elena extended her trembling hand. Alexander drew the blade across his own palm, then hers. Blood welled his dark as wine, hers bright red. He pressed their palms together, and electricity sparked through her veins. Repeat after me, he said softly. I offer my blood freely. I offer my blood freely. I accept the bond of House Blackwood. I accept the bond of House Blackwood. I trust you with my life. Elena's voice broke. I trust you with my life. Power exploded through her, cold and vast and ancient. She gasped, her back arching, as Alexander's presence flooded her senses. She could feel him, not physically, but essentially. His age, his control, his fierce, terrible need to protect what was his, and underneath it all centuries of loneliness. It's done, Alexander whispered. And Elena saw something like relief in his inhuman eyes. Then the world tilted, and darkness claimed her. Chapter 7. The bond's price. Elena woke to darkness and the certainty that she was not alone. She could feel him, Alexander, like a second heartbeat just beneath her own. His presence thrummed through her veins, cold and vast and impossibly ancient. When she concentrated, she could sense his location, nearby, watching, waiting. I'm here. His voice came from the shadows beside her bed. A different bed, she realized. Not her destroyed chambers, but somewhere else. Somewhere darker. Where? Her throat was raw from smoke. The West Wing. My chambers. A pause. You needed protection. The wards in the East Wing couldn't provide. I brought you here while you were unconscious. Do you want me to leave? The question was genuine. Even now, even with her lying in his bed, in his forbidden chambers, he was asking permission. The bond hummed between them, and Elena could feel the effort that courtesy cost him. He wanted to stay, needed to stay. The bond made separation painful. No, she whispered. Stay. A candle flared to life, and Elena saw him properly for the first time since the attack. He'd changed clothes, black shirt, black trousers, but his hair was still disheveled from battle. Inhuman beauty marked by very human disarray. How do you feel? He asked. Elena took inventory. Her ankle throbbed with a deep, bone-level ache, but the pain was distant, muted. The bond, she realized. Alexander was somehow absorbing part of her suffering. She could feel it flowing from her through their joined blood. You're taking my pain, she accused softly. I'm sharing it. That's what the bond does. He moved closer, and Elena's breath caught. She could feel his emotions now, concern layered over fury, protectiveness wrapped around guilt. I should have anticipated Cassius would use fire. I should have. You saved my life. After putting it in danger, his jaw clenched. 4 wives dead, and now a 5th nearly killed because I thought I could outmaneuver a vampire who's been playing these games for 8 centuries. Elena struggled to sit up. Alexander was beside her instantly, helping her with hands that were gentle despite their inhuman strength. The bond flared at the contact, sending sparks of awareness through her body. "What is that?" she gasped. The bond recognizing physical contact. "It will fade, eventually." But his hand lingered on her shoulder, and she could feel his reluctance to break the connection. "Elena, we need to discuss what happens next." "You mean running?" "I mean surviving." He released her and stepped back, and the loss of contact made them both flinch. Cassius knows about the bond now. He'll feel it the same way every vampire in 100 miles can feel it, a signature of power, a claim of territory. "You're no longer just my wife in name. You're my bonded consort." That changes everything. Elena pulled the blankets closer, though she wasn't cold. "Changes it how?" "House law says a bonded consort cannot be killed without declaring formal war. Cassius has been attacking through proxies, maintaining deniability. If he moves against you directly now, every house in Europe will recognize it as a declaration. He'll have to face me in open combat." "That sounds like a good thing." "It would be, if I trusted Cassius to follow house law." Alexander began pacing, the first truly agitated movement she'd seen from him. "He's desperate. House Tenebris is losing power. Their mortal territories are rebelling. Their vampire subordinates are defecting to houses that don't treat humans as cattle. Cassius needs a victory, something to prove he's still formidable. Killing me would accomplish that. So he'll challenge you directly? Or he'll cheat, find some way to attack you. That looks like an accident that can't be traced back to him." Alexander stopped pacing, his eyes meeting hers. "The bond protects you from other vampires. They literally cannot harm you without experiencing the same harm. But it doesn't protect you from mortal assassins, from poison, from manufactured accidents." Elena's stomach tightened. "Then what do? We go to ground. There's a secondary estate in Scotland, heavily fortified, far from Cassius's territory. We can leave tonight, take only what's necessary." "No." Alexander stared at her. "No? Running makes us look weak." Elena swung her legs over the side of the bed, ignoring the protest from her ankle. "You said Cassius needs a victory. If we flee, he gets one. He drove House Blackwood from its ancestral seat. That's the story that will spread through the vampire world. Better that story than your corpse, is it?" Elena stood, wobbling. Alexander caught her instantly, his hands on her waist, steadying her. The bond sang at the contact, and she had to force herself to focus. "You've spent 600 years building House Blackwood's reputation on consent, on restraint, on being strong enough to choose control. Running from Cassius undermines all of that. You're mortal. You don't understand. I understand strategy." She gripped his arms, meeting his burning gaze. "My father was a military chaplain. I grew up reading battlefield accounts. I know that retreating from a defensive position into a known territory is how you get slaughtered. This house is warded. You know every corridor, every exit. Your people are here. Your resources are here. Why would we abandon that?" Alexander's expression shifted, surprise bleeding into something like admiration. "You want to fight. I want to survive. And I think fighting gives us better odds than running." Elena could feel his emotions through the bond, the war between protective instinct and strategic calculation. "You chose me because you thought I was smart enough to survive. Let me prove you right." Silence stretched between them. Then slowly, Alexander smiled, a real smile, not the cold calculation she'd seen before. It transformed his face, made him look younger, almost human. "You're right," he said softly. "And I'm a fool for not seeing it immediately. So we stay?" "We stay." His hands tightened on her waist. "But Elena, if we do this, you need to understand what you're committing to. Cassius will send everything he has. The siege has only just begun. Then we'd better prepare." She swayed slightly, exhaustion catching up with her. Alexander caught her, lifting her back onto the bed. "Rest first. When you wake, I'll teach you how to use the bond as a weapon." "A weapon?" His smile turned sharp, predatory. "Oh yes. You didn't think it was only for protection, did you?" Chapter 8. Lessons in Blue. Delina slept for 14 hours. When she finally woke, her ankle was already healing, not completely, but faster than should be possible. "The bond's influence," Alexander explained when he brought her breakfast. His blood in her veins accelerated her natural healing, though not to vampire levels. "You'll mend in days rather than weeks," he said, setting the tray beside her. One of many advantages. Elena studied the food: fresh bread, cheese, fruit, tea. You arranged this, Mrs. Holloway did. She's pleased you survived, though she'll never admit it. He settled into the chair by the window, and morning light filtered through heavy curtains painted him in shades of amber. How do you feel? Strange. Elena reached for the tea, grateful for something to do with her hands. I can feel you. Not physically, but your presence. Like you're always just at the edge of my awareness. It works both ways. I know you're frightened, but trying not to show it. I know your ankle hurts, despite the healing. I know you're angry with yourself for not seeing the fire attack coming. His eyes met hers. The bond strips away pretense. We can't truly lie to each other anymore. The intimacy of it made Elena's chest tight. That's terrifying, yes, but also freeing. He leaned forward. Elena, I promise to teach you how to weaponize the bond. Are you ready? She set down her teacup. Tell me. The bond creates a channel between us. Right now, it flows naturally. You feel my emotions. I feel yours. We share pain and healing. But with practice, you can push through that channel deliberately. Alexander extended his hand. Give me your hand, and concentrate on what you're feeling. Fear, anger, anything strong. Elena placed her hand in his. The bond flared immediately, that electric awareness of connection. She thought about the fire, the smoke choking her lungs, the terror of falling. Alexander inhaled sharply. Good, I felt that. Your fear hit me like a physical blow. Now imagine pushing it harder, concentrating it into a weapon. How? Intent. The bond responds to will. His fingers tightened on hers. Think of your fear as something tangible, something you can thrust at me like a blade. Elena closed her eyes and concentrated. The fear was easy to find. It had been her constant companion since arriving at this house. She gathered it, shaped it, and pushed. Alexander's hand spasmed in hers. When she opened her eyes, he was breathing hard, actually breathing, his chest rising and falling with effort. Excellent. You just forced an involuntary response from a 600-year-old vampire. Do you understand what that means? That I can hurt you? That you can defend yourself? If another vampire tries to attack you, you can push your emotions through the bond, and I'll feel it. Even if I'm miles away, I'll know you're in danger. And if they're touching you when you push, his smile was savage. The bond will retaliate. Any vampire who harms you will experience the same harm amplified. It's the ultimate deterrent. Elena stared at their joined hands. You're teaching me to use you as a shield. I'm teaching you to fight back. There's a difference. He released her hand and stood. But the bond has other uses. Come, I want to show you something. He helped her stand, supporting her weight as she limped beside him. They walked through the West Wing, his forbidden territory, and Elena saw why it had been closed to her before. Every wall was covered in maps, battle plans, intelligence reports, lists of names marked in red or black. This wasn't a home. It was a war room. House Blackwood's operations center, Alexander said, watching her face. Everything I know about Cassius's movements, his allies, his weaknesses. I've been preparing for this war for decades. Elena limped to the nearest map, Europe, marked with territories in different colors. These are the houses? Yes. Black for Blackwood, red for Tenebris, blue for Corvus, gold for Nox. He pointed to clusters of red spreading across the Mediterranean. Cassius has been expanding aggressively. Most houses won't oppose him directly because he's vicious and doesn't follow the old laws, but they're watching, waiting to see if someone will stand against him. You, me. Alexander moved to a different table, covered in correspondence. These are offers of alliance. Minor houses willing to support me if I move against Cassius openly. But they want proof I'm strong enough to win. Proof that House Blackwood isn't the dying power Cassius claims. Elena studied the letters, her mind working. The blood bond. That's your proof. Partly. A successful bond demonstrates control, which is the foundation of our power. But we need more. He pulled out a leather journal, its pages covered in cramped handwriting. Cassius keeps mortal estates in Italy, breeding farms for humans. If we could free them, document the conditions, bring evidence before the Council of Houses, you could prove he violates the old laws and turn the other houses against him. Elena's pulse quickened. When do we leave? Alexander's expression shifted to alarm. We don't. You're not healed enough for travel. And I'm not taking you into Cassius's territory. The bond works both ways, remember? Elena interrupted. You feel what I feel. If you go alone and walk into a trap, I'll feel you die. Is that what you want? Me helpless here, while you're torn apart an ocean away? His jaw clenched. You're mortal. The risks are the same whether I'm here or there. Cassius wants me dead. At least if I'm with you, we can protect each other. She moved closer, ignoring the pain in her ankle. You said you chose me because I was smart enough to survive. Trust that intelligence now. Let me help you. The bond hummed between them, carrying her determination and his resistance. Elena could feel him wavering, could sense the war between protective instinct and strategic necessity. If you come, he said finally, you follow my orders absolutely. No heroics. No taking unnecessary risks. Agreed. And you train. Every night. Until you can weaponize the bond without thinking. His eyes blazed. Because if we do this, Elena, we're starting a war that will reshape the vampire world. There's no going back. Elena thought of the 4 wives before her, dead because they didn't know the truth. Thought of the humans trapped in Cassius's breeding farms. Thought of Alexander's loneliness. Centuries deep. Then we don't go back, she said. We go forward. Chapter 9. The Gambithi left for Italy. 3 nights later, Elena's ankle had healed enough to walk without limping. Though Alexander insisted she use a cane, an elegant thing of polished blackwood that doubled as a weapon. He'd shown her the hidden blade in its base, the silver coating that could kill a young vampire with a single thrust. Not that you'll need it, he'd said, his hand covering hers on the handle. But insurance is wise. The journey was strange. They traveled only at night, Alexander's intolerance for sunlight making day travel impossible. Elena slept in swaying train compartments while he sat motionless beside her, watching the darkness rush past. She could feel him through the bond, his alertness, his constant calculation, the predatory awareness that never truly rested. Do you ever sleep? She asked on their second night, somewhere between Paris and Turin. Not as you understand it. I enter a dormant state during daylight hours. Rest, but not sleep. No dreams. He turned from the window. Do you dream, Elena? Every night since the fire. I dream I'm burning, and you're too far away to hear me scream. His expression tightened. I would hear you. The bond ensures it. You could whisper my name from across the continent, and I would come. Promise? Promise. He reached for her hand, and the bond flared warm between them. I know this is difficult. Trusting a monster. You're not a monster. I've killed hundreds of people, Elena. Thousands, probably, over 6 centuries. I've made choices that haunt me. I am precisely what the word monster describes. Elena studied him in the dim lamplight. Monsters don't ask permission. Monsters don't build power on consent. Monsters don't spend 3 nights teaching their mortal wife how to defend herself. She squeezed his hand. You're complicated. That's not the same thing. Something shifted in his expression, vulnerability, raw and ancient. You're dangerously optimistic. Someone has to be. They arrived in Florence as the city bells tolled midnight. Alexander had arranged lodging in a palazzo owned by a sympathetic vampire, Lady Marcella of House Corvus, who had no love for Cassius. She'll provide intelligence and a safe haven, Alexander explained as their carriage wound through narrow streets. But she won't risk open alliance. Not yet. Lady Marcella met them in a courtyard lit by torches. She was beautiful. The way all old vampires were beautiful to perfect, to still, like a painting come to life. Her eyes, black as pitch, swept over Elena with predatory interest. So this is the mortal who captured Alexander Blackwood's cold heart. Her voice was silk and smoke. I confess, I'm surprised. Usually his taste runs toward the forgettable. Marcella. Alexander's warning tone cut through the courtyard. Peace, Alexander. I mean no offense. Marcella glided closer, circling Elena like a shark. The bond is strong. I can feel it from here. Impressive, for such a young connection. Tell me, little mortal, are you ready to start a war? Elena lifted her chin. I'm ready to finish one. Marcella laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Oh, I see why you chose her. She has teeth. She turned to Alexander. The estate you seek is 30 miles south. Cassius keeps 50 mortals there, breeding them like livestock. The conditions are regrettable, but he has guards 12 vampires, all loyal, all vicious. Can you get us inside? Alexander asked. I can get you to the gates. The rest is your concern. Marcella's expression sobered. Alexander, if you do this, if you free those mortals and bring evidence before the council, Cassius will retaliate. He'll come for you with everything he has. Are you prepared for that? I've been preparing for 200 years. And her? Marcella's gaze flicked to Elena. Is she prepared to watch you die? Because that's what bonded consorts do when their vampires fall. They break. Completely. Irreparably. Elena felt ice slide down her spine. What does that mean? It means the bond is permanent, Alexander said quietly. If I die, you'll feel it. The connection will tear apart violently. Some bonded mortals survive the shock. Most don't. You didn't mention that. Would it have changed your decision? Elena wanted to say yes, wanted to rage at him for hiding such a crucial detail. But through the bond, she could feel his guilt, his fear, his desperate need for her to understand. No, she admitted. It wouldn't have. But you should have told me. You're right. I'm sorry. He turned back to Marcella. When can we move? Tomorrow night. I'll arrange transport and a distraction. But Alexander, Marcella's expression turned grave. If you're caught, I cannot help you. House Corvus cannot afford war with Tenebris. You will be on your own. Understood. They spent the day in Marcella's palazzo, planning. Elena studied maps while Alexander interrogated informants, mortals who had escaped Cassius's estate, their stories making her stomach turn. Children taken from their parents, women forced to breed, men drained until they were hollow shells, then discarded. This is what he does, Alexander said when the last informant left. This is the world he wants, mortals as cattle, vampires as gods. If we don't stop him, this spreads, house by house, country by country, until consent is a forgotten dream. Elena looked at the maps, the testimonies, the evidence of systematic horror. Then we stop him. That night, they prepared. Alexander gave her a vial of his blood in case you're injured and I'm not close enough to heal you through the bond. He showed her escape routes, contingencies, signals. He made her promise again and again that she would run if things went wrong. I won't leave you, Elena said. You will if I order it. The bond gives me that power. Then don't use it. She caught his face between her hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. We're partners now, equals, not master and servant. The bond thrummed between them, carrying her conviction and his conflict. Finally he nodded. Equals, he agreed. God help us both. As midnight approached, Marcella's carriage arrived. Elena climbed in beside Alexander, her heart pounding, the cane heavy across her lap. Ready? He asked. Elena thought of the mortals in cages. The wives before her who'd died in ignorance. The lonely vampire who'd chosen truth over comfort. Ready, she said, and they rode toward war. Chapter 10. Blood and Choiceth. Estate rose from the Tuscan hills like a wound in the landscape, beautiful architecture concealing monstrous purpose. Elena crouched beside Alexander in the cypress grove overlooking the compound, her pulse thundering so loudly, she was certain every vampire inside could hear it. Through the bond, she felt Alexander's predatory focus, cold and absolute. 12 guards, he murmured. 8 patrolling the grounds, 4 inside with the mortals. Marcella's distraction should draw the outer guards away. That gives us 10 minutes to reach the mortals and extract evidence. And if the distraction fails, then I kill everyone between you and safety. His eyes met hers, burning amber. Stay behind me. Use the bond if you're threatened. And Elena, his hand found hers. If I tell you to run, you run. Promise me. Before she could answer, light exploded in the eastern sky. Marcella's distraction, a warehouse fire, dramatic and unmistakable. The guards reacted instantly, 6 of them vanishing toward the blaze with inhuman speed. Now, Alexander commanded. They moved through the shadows. Alexander's speed forcing Elena to sprint to keep pace. The compound's outer wall was 12 feet high, but Alexander lifted her over it as though she weighed nothing, then vaulted after her with liquid grace. The main house loomed ahead. Alexander dispatched the remaining 2 outer guards with brutal efficiency, movements so fast Elena barely saw them. Just bodies falling, soundless, permanently dead. The cellars, he said, leading her to a side entrance. The door was locked, but Alexander's strength made the mechanism irrelevant. It tore free with a shriek of metal. The smell hit Elena first, unwashed bodies, fear, despair. Then she saw them, 50 mortals, maybe more, crammed into cells barely large enough to stand. Children huddled with adults, women with hollow eyes, men too thin to be healthy, all of them staring at the intruders with expressions caught between hope and terror. We're here to free you, Elena called, her voice breaking. We're behind you, Alexander roared. Elena spun. A vampire emerged from the shadows, young, female, fangs bared. Elena's hand moved on instinct, drawing the blade from her cane and thrusting upward. The silver bit deep into the vampire's throat, and the creature shrieked, collapsing. Elena stared at the body, at the blood on her hands. She'd just killed someone, something. The bond pulsed with Alexander's grim approval and her own shocked horror. Good, he said, already moving to break open the cells. Stay alert. There are 3 more. The mortals poured out, crying, thanking them. Alexander worked with focused intensity, herding them toward the exit. But Elena felt it through the bond, his awareness of time slipping away. Of guards returning. Take them, Alexander ordered, pushing a young woman toward Elena. Get them to Marcella's carriage. I'll hold off whoever comes. No, we go together. Elena, the windows shattered. 3 vampires crashed through, and Alexander moved to intercept them. The fight was savage, inhuman speed and strength beyond mortal comprehension. Elena ushered the mortals toward the exit, her mind racing. Through the bond, she felt Alexander faltering. He was strong, but 3 against 1, and these weren't fledglings. These were Cassius's elite. Elena made a choice. She concentrated on the bond, gathering every ounce of fear and fury she possessed, and pushed. The energy surged through their connection like lightning. Alexander gasped, but the vampires attacking him screamed. The bond's retaliation hit them. Elena's emotional assault, amplified through Alexander's power, turned into a weapon. 2 vampires collapsed, clutching their heads. The 3rd hesitated, and Alexander didn't waste the opening. His hand punched through the vampire's chest, ripping out what passed for a heart, but the distraction cost him. The 2 recovered vampires lunged simultaneously. Alexander went down beneath their combined weight, and Elena felt his pain explode through the bond, ribs cracking, shoulder dislocating. She ran toward them, cane raised, but a hand caught her arm. Mrs. Holloway. The housekeeper had appeared from nowhere, dressed for battle, her face coldly furious. Get the mortals out. I'll help him. But that's an order, Mrs. Blackwood. Mrs. Holloway's eyes flashed red vampire eyes. Protect the witnesses. That's why you came. Elena wanted to refuse, wanted to fight beside Alexander. But the bond carried his desperate command. Go, please. She went. The journey to Marcella's carriage was a blur of terror and determination. Elena herded 50 traumatized mortals through the Tuscan night, while behind them, the estate erupted in violence. She felt every blow Alexander took, every kill he made. The bond keeping her agonizingly aware of his struggle. When they finally reached the carriage, actually multiple carriages Marcella had prepared, Elena collapsed against the nearest wheel, gasping. The mortals were loading, crying, thanking her. But all she could feel was Alexander, distant. Now, his presence in the bond flickering like a dying candle. No, stay with me. She pushed through the bond, sending him everything she had, her strength, her will, her desperate refusal to let him die. The connection blazed, and she felt his response, surprise, then gratitude, then renewed determination. Minutes passed like hours. Then movement in the darkness. Alexander emerged from the trees, Mrs. Holloway supporting his weight. He was covered in blood, his own and others, but alive. Battered, wounded, but alive. Elena ran to him, and he caught her with his good arm, pulling her close. The bond sang between them, relief and pain and something deeper, something neither had words for. You pushed through the bond, he murmured against her hair. You gave me strength when I had none left. Partners, Elena whispered. Remember? How could I forget? Marcella's people secured the mortals, documented their testimonies, gathered evidence. By dawn, they had enough to bring before the Council of Houses proof of Cassius's crimes, witnessed by 50 survivors, but Elena barely noticed. She sat with Alexander as Mrs. Holloway tended his wounds, her hand clasped in his, the bond humming between them like a second heartbeat. What happens now? She asked. Now we present the evidence. The council will have no choice but to act against Cassius. He'll be stripped of his house, his territories, his power. Alexander's eyes met hers. And we'll have started a new era, one where consent matters, where mortals aren't cattle, where houses like mine can thrive, and us. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, I don't know. The bond is permanent. You're tied to me for as long as you live. I can release you from the marriage, give you wealth and freedom, but the connection remains. You'll always feel me, always know where I am, always carry part of my curse. Elena looked at their joined hands, at the vampire who'd given her truth and partnership and a purpose larger than survival. I don't want release, she said. I want partnership, real partnership, building something better together. Even though I'm a monster? Even though, she smiled. Besides, I'm a monster now too. I killed tonight. I weaponized our bond. I started a war. Seems we're well matched. Alexander laughed a real laugh, warm and surprised and achingly human. God help the vampire world. They have no idea what's coming. Then we'd better prepare them. As dawn broke over the Tuscan hills, Elena Blackwood, mortal wife of an immortal lord, bonded consort of House Blackwood, and architect of revolution, leaned against her husband and felt, for the first time since her old life shattered, truly alive. The war had only begun, but they would face it together, and the darkness would learn to fear the light.